5 variables that have to do with the baby coming out of a woman's body that determine how the labor goes. Whether the labor's easy, whether the labor's difficult, or whether the labor's impossible and the woman gets a C-section depends on these 5 variables. First variable that has to do with the baby coming out of a woman's body is the size of a woman's pelvis. Everybody says, well, yeah, I know that, but let me break it down. We're not talking about hip size, blue jean size. We're talking about the internal bone structure. Now, if you think about that, if you take 100 girls who are the exact same height and weight and you line them up, they're not all going to have the same shoe size. They're not going to have the same hat size. They're not going to have the same glove size. They're not going to have the same bra size. And guess what? They don't have the same pelvis size because God doesn't make carbon copies of humans. Even if a bunch of women are the exact same height and weight, their anatomy varies from one person to the next. So the first variable that has to do with the baby coming out of her body is the size of her pelvis. Second variable is the shape of the pelvis. Some pelvises are round, some of them are heart-shaped, some of them are egg-shaped, some of them are flattened. Inside of the pelvis are the ischial spines. Some of them are prominent, some of them are small, some of them are blunt, some of them are sharp. Look at the pelvis from the side. Look at the distance from the tailbone to the pubic bone with this pelvis and the distance from the tailbone to the pubic bone on this pelvis. Look at the length of this tailbone and the length of this tailbone. Now look at the pelvis from the front. Look at the thickness of this pubic bone and the thickness of this pubic bone. Look at the arch under the pubic bone the baby's head has to pivot under and the arch the baby has to pivot under. So not only do you have different sizes of pelvises, but you have different shapes of pelvises, and those are separate variables that have to do with the baby coming out of a mother. Let me give you an example. A woman can have a perfectly shaped pelvis like the first one, but if it's only this big around, it won't help you. And vice versa, a woman can have a badly shaped pelvis like this one, but if it's this big, it doesn't matter. Now those are extremes. Most women are halfway in between, but you get my point that the size of the pelvis and the shape of the pelvis are separate variables that have to do with the baby coming out of the mother. Third variable that has to do with the baby coming out is the size of the baby. Now I didn't say the weight of the baby, size of the baby. Because think about this for a second. If you take 2 babies in the newborn nursery that both weigh exactly 7 pounds 0 ounces apiece, baby A, 15 inches long, short, stocky, big head, wide shoulders. Baby B is 22 inches long, tall and skinny. They both weigh 7 pounds, but it's much easier to push out a tall, skinny baby than it is a short, stocky baby with a big head and wide shoulders. So it isn't the weight of the baby, it's the size of the baby. Fourth variable that has to do with the baby coming out of a mother's body is the position the baby's in when the baby goes through the birth canal. Now everybody's seen those pictures about how babies go through the birth canal, but the babies haven't all seen the pictures. They don't all do it that way. Normally a baby's head down, floating around in mom, and then one day that uterus starts getting really hard and starts pushing that baby toward the cervix. So what's the baby do? The first thing the baby does is the baby puts the chin on the chest like this. Why? 3 reasons. When babies are born, their neck muscles are weak. So by putting the chin on the chest, it stabilizes the head. Second reason that the chin is on the chest is that's the smallest diameter to fit through the mother's pelvis. The third reason is with the chin on the chest, the crown of the head's coming first, and that's the strongest part of the baby because the spine is pushing up on the back of the baby's head. As the baby's head comes down the birth canal, the pubic bone acts like a pivot point. As the baby's head comes under the pubic bone, the head and the chin come up, then you can actually see the baby's head rotate on the outside of the mother as the shoulders come through. But as I said, sometimes babies haven't seen the pictures and they don't always do it that way. Sometimes a baby will come with the brow first or the chin first. That's wider, that's harder. Sometimes instead of coming straight down the birth canal, the baby will get its head kinked off on the side like this. That's called asynclitism. That's wider, that's harder. Sometimes instead of coming nose down, the baby will be nose up. And I told you the pubic bone is the pivot point, but if a baby is nose up and it can't pivot, so it can tear all the way through the mother. Sometimes the baby will have an arm down by the neck or even above the head, which will block the baby from coming down. So those are all the reasons why sometimes it's much more difficult. The fifth variable that has to do with the baby coming out are the soft tissues, the sex organs. Sex organs are different from one woman to the next, just like faces are different from one woman to the next. It's not good or bad. It's like saying a woman's a blonde or brunette or a redhead, but the difference can make a difference in the delivery. So 5 variables that have to do with the baby coming out of the mother. Size of the pelvis, shape of the pelvis. Size of the baby, not the weight. Position the baby's in, and the sex organs. You know which one the mother controls? None of them. A lot of people would like to say that they controlled the delivery process when in fact they were lucky because all their variables lined up for them. And the opposite is also true. Many women feel discouraged if they're unable to deliver and feel like they're less of a woman or not as strong, and really it's out of their control. That's why you cannot compare one woman's labor to another woman's labor, because each woman has different variables. And in fact, you can't even compare the second baby to the first baby in the same mother, because the size of the pelvis, the shape of the pelvis, and the sex organs don't change, but all it takes is a different size baby or different position for the baby to be in, and it'll change the whole labor even in the same mother. So that's why you cannot anticipate how a labor is going to go, despite how well you imagine it and want it to be.